I am Jamie Cope with the WVU Industrial Extension, and going to go through a few quick housekeeping things before we turn it over to Adam. But just remember that we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We've got a pretty good size group, so the chat's probably the best way to do it. And we will field those at the end, or if it's something that's relevant to what Adam's talking about at the time, I'll interrupt him and we'll throw it in there. Adam, he's excited to have questions, so please don't hold back. If you do have questions, keep this thing rolling. Also, we will be recording, or we are recording. So if you would like to have a recording of this at the end, if you've registered, we're going to send that out to everybody. So everybody who's registered will have the recording, and feel free to share that. It's a YouTube link. We may even get Adam to share slides. I didn't talk to him about that, but if
absolutely.
Okay, great. So look for the slides and a recording whenever we're done. Probably get that out early next week. And don't forget, here at the WVU Industrial Extension, we're always here to help. So would love to have direct contact with any of us to see if you've got some problems. We'd love to try to solve them. And yeah, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Lough. He is the Global Supply Chain Manager for Northrop Grumman. And he also has started Orchard Street Solutions, a consultancy firm. So Adam, we're excited to hear about lean manufacturing and team building. And we know you've got a lot of experience in that area. So just run with it.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Jamie. I want to thank everybody who's showed up today to listen to me talk, which is it's kind of an odd thing for me, but I'm really happy to be able to spread any knowledge that I have and to be able to help everyone out. So let me go ahead and push into my next slide. This is just a little bit about me. I'll kind of explain who I am, where I come from, and why I'm here and doing this and how I got into this. So as Jamie said, I am Adam Lough. I'm from Orchard Street Solutions, and my current role, my day job, we'll call it, is a Global Supply Chains Operation Manager for Northrop Grumman. I am in Baltimore, Maryland, where we have a pretty large facility, about 7,500 people who work there with us. About 4,000 of those are manufacturing personnel. So I work in the integration operations sector. That's the final assembly area where we actually put the radar together. That's what we build there. It's very complex, very high level engineering, and it's a lot of fun to do. It's a very cool product. Many product lines, actually, very cool. But so yeah, I went to WVU. I got my BS in journalism from there. And then after school, I worked in the state at a couple of places, a manufacturing facility, small manufacturing facility. And then I worked at the Greenbrier. Then I went in the United States Marine Corps and was in signals intelligence for 5 years. And then so the last little note I have there is from got my MBA finally wrapped up just this year. I was pumped to do that through their great program. And that's actually where I come into this group. So I made some contacts at WVU and I said, hey, I am this kid from the state of West Virginia. I want to help. I love the state. I've got family there. What can I do to support the economic situation there in West Virginia? So through some channels, some great people through the school, they hooked me up with the IE group here. Fantastic people who have brought me in, have discussed a lot of this awesome manufacturing stuff that we're going to talk about today. And so they kind of hooked me up with this presentation today. So I'm really excited. I thank them so much for bringing me on, just giving me an opportunity to volunteer to help the state, and then also to make some contacts so that we can work together to raise the economic capabilities and the life for the folks there in West Virginia. So excited to do that and hope that's what this leads to. And that's enough about me. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So from what I understand, there's a good group of people here today who may be on different parts of your lean journey. We never get to the end of a lean journey, as those of us who are on that journey know, which is a good thing. It's all about the process improvement. But for the folks who might be on the front end of it, considering whether or not this is something that you want to do with your manufacturing facility, I want to just kind of give a brief, and some of this is just my words and my definitions of what lean looks like, but it's pretty common of a system across. So it's basically the process of eliminating waste. That's, if you boil it all down, that's what you want to do in your system. And so that said, it fits into almost any manufacturing system that you can think of. There is a waste pretty much anywhere, unless you feel like you are so streamlined there is absolutely zero waste. Then fantastic. good for you. I would love to come work for you and see what that looks like because I haven't seen it yet. So lean manufacturing, this is, like I said, my definition is the system used to continuously improve the manufacturing operation through the discovery and sustainment of waste removal within all areas of the system. And that also comes along with a lot of tools on how you do that. What's the framework? How do you put this? How do you know whether you're on the right track and whether you're finding the stuff and all that? So that we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and specifically how those tools and how lean can be used in your team building efforts and how those things can work together. So let me go on to the next slide. So team building in a lean environment. These are going to be some general things that you can practice. Specifically, this slide, it's going to address more of team building, and there will be some relation to lean there as well. The further slides will show us how we can use those lean tools to directly affect our team building efforts. So the first thing I'd like to discuss is just my general kind of understanding of, since I've been through this on several different occasions. We've implemented lean there in multiple locations throughout the factory. It kind of started off as a cell-wide, now it's a factory-wide implementation. And so I've actually been on the front end of a lean journey 3 times now since I've been in the factory. Once was with our microelectronic cell. The next one was with what's called our technology accelerator cell, where it was a brand new area where we were putting in this fantastic brand new manufacturing equipment. We had to figure out how to make it all work and do that in a lean environment. So it was very, very kind of wide ranging what we were doing in there. And so we had to figure out how, because we wanted lean to be the foundation in the system we used, so that when we remove those new pieces of technology, we put those into the cell for manufacturing capabilities, that the lean journey and the lean processes move right along with them. So we wanted to create a good lean foundation there. So I ran that for a while. I implemented lean in, I guess now maybe four times. So multiple manufacturing cells. So that's where I'm coming from. And what I've learned there is that there can sometimes seem like lean can be at odds with people management. And it's very process focused. It's very structured. And sometimes we all know people aren't, as process oriented. There's more variation in a person. So how do you deal with that variation from person to person while you're trying to build a team? And you're also, doing it on the back of a lean environment, or underneath or within a lean environment. So they don't have to be at odds. In fact, you can use many lean tools to impact your day-to-day with your people. And in fact, I use many of the lean tools that I've learned on the individuals and the team itself. So I'll explain a little bit more about that here in just one second. So second point is, remember, it's a professional team. I think that gets lost sometimes. We use words like family, and we use words like, but you're trying to design a team very much like, a professional football team. So when you're thinking about team building, thinking about them in the realm of, how do I create a championship team here? It will help because, you don't see a football coach of a championship team kind of just performing their operation in a willy-nilly way, and you don't have much structure. There's no foundation, there's no systems in place, and they just win all the time. That's extremely rare if you'll ever find it. So how do you look at your team like a professional team, and then what stepping stones are you putting in place to make sure that your professional team is finding, getting the root? Where are your deficits, and what can you work on, and what projects do you have to make them better, just like a professional team would do. Another thing I'll bring up from time to time through here, because I've done this on both realms, is professional. We call them professional or union, non-union environment, represented versus non-represented. And so your actions and your abilities and your freedom can sometimes, or I wouldn't say call it freedom necessarily, but your methods may change depending on which environment you're in. With a represented environment, you have union contract, and you have to fit within the realm of the union contract. That's a good thing. How do we do that when we have lean initiatives that may or may not fit within there as tightly as we'd like? So you can get creative with some of the ideas, and you can as long as you understand the contract. We've done that on the floor, and it's worked out perfectly. Knowing the language of the contract is very important, because you don't want to get yourself into problems, especially when you're team building, because you don't want it to seem as though you're not accommodating the union environment, and kind of pushing where you shouldn't push, and you don't want to step on any landmines with that. So just being aware is very important, of how your tool might fit into that environment. And then again, with represented, there are also elements, or non-represented. I'm sorry. There are elements there that you have to consider as well, as far as coaching and how that will look, and your progress and or progressive discipline potentially. We'll talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of different elements of team building that come in to play with a non-represented team. That may not be present in a represented team because of the structure. So, and again, I'll make points throughout the rest of the slides, and I'll try to tie those back in. I don't know how many folks we have that are working in represented environments right now, but there will be somewhat of a difference and somewhat of a tactic and methods that you can use. And it might just be personality. It might be the way that you actually just address your team. I found that, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar in a union, in a represented environment, and but it's all about creating that team environment. And whether you're union, non-union, it doesn't really matter. You need everybody rowing in the same direction. That's my last bullet point. I'll bring it up here to the top. So you want everybody rowing in the same direction. And this is how we can use these lean tools to get everybody rowing in the same direction. I won't go too deep into the SWOT analysis. I call it a SWOT analysis, and you can use kind of any way to define the team as a whole and your team as individuals, with a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats type of a model. Some people use personality models to try to determine how you coach each individual person the best way. I would definitely encourage that. And this is kind of just in general. This doesn't necessarily have to involve the lean framework, but it does fit very well because, just like when you're building a professional team, you're not going to put your punter probably as a middle linebacker. Sometimes you may. That would be awesome. But oftentimes people play different positions for specific reasons. So as you're determining which type of people you have, you might be able to connect them with the role on your team that they would play the best in, and that creates synergy. I'm bringing a word back from what the 90s maybe that was really big for a while, and people have said stop using that word, but it works best in this situation, is to create that synergistic environment for your team. And one of the main stepping stones for that is getting people into positions that they're going to be good at, that they're going to enjoy, and that they feel supported in. The next bullet point there is defining expectations, defining outcomes, and defining why. Now, each of these could be their own webinar, a series of webinars. Defining expectations, defining outcomes, and defining why for a team building environment are imperative. And I will directly connect lean tools to each of these. But just as an overview, when people walk into a situation, the quickest way to get people to be apathetic or to not want to be a part of a team is when they come in and they have no clue what they're doing or why they're there. And they have no expectations. They may be doing the right job. They may not be doing the right job. So from what I found in my former roles and even today, specifically in the role that I'm in now, because the role I'm in now, we actually have created a brand new organization within for a global supply chain organization within our group that has never been done before. We've never been cell facing and within the cells and on the manufacturing floor since as far back as I can remember. So we had to create from scratch the expectations for our group. And at first we didn't know. And I saw a lot of floundering. I failed there, when I first came into this, because I wasn't ready for that expectation building and what that would do to my team. So that was a good lessons learned for me, is defining those expectations. And so I learned quickly that a standard work document is from my perspective, one of the best ways you can create some expectations for your team. And I'll explain a little bit more about that here in just one second. Defining outcomes. What are your goals? Do you know where you're going? How in the world are you going to set stepping stones towards your goals if you don't really know where you're going. So defining your outcomes, knowing what your goals are for team building, imperative, so that they are all moving in the same direction. And then defining why. This one is often, as we know, things can go 150 miles an hour and you don't really maybe know why things have come down, or you don't feel like you have the time to explain why. But when you want to receive buy-in, which is key to creating a good, solid team environment, defining a why if and when you can, and pushing for that why for your team is unbelievably important, so that they know I'm not just doing this because, they want to know, in a team environment, you want to know what you're moving towards and why we're doing things. And that also will come into play when you start discussing ideas, an idea card system or an idea system generation system that we'll talk about within your lean tool set. When you're doing that, if they know why you are doing something, it seems to be, and in my experience, folks are way more willing to give those key ideas, to say, well, we're doing all these things this way, but if our ultimate goal, if the why of why we're doing this is X, here's another way we can get there. And you say, I would have never dreamed of that. And an idea system and an ideas generation system within a lean framework can help pull those ideas out from the folks on the floor who are your experts in how things are going to work, and what will be the best way to make things work. So defining those three things is extremely important, and then continuing to follow up on that. And that's kind of like the plan, do, check, act tool that we'll talk about. Plan, do, check, act is part of all of these things: defining your expectations, defining your outcomes, and defining your why. As well as your root cause analysis and all those good things. So the next point down is your managerial attitude. And I could have put this as number one all the way down and kind of framed it as one of the most important elements of team building. If your managerial attitude towards implementing lean is negative, we all know what's going to happen there. The outcome of that is going to be a negative perception of lean. So in my experience, the best way to start out on your lean journey, or at least, or even continue on your lean journey, is to bring in your key players, which, your management system, your managers, your team leads, all those folks, and really coaching them up to know why lean is important for your shop. There's also, I like to mention here, infectors. Find your infectors, those people who are always out there talking to everybody. And if they know something, then everybody's going to know something. If you can win over your infectors for a lean journey or a lean transition, and this is just any idea you want to implement on your floor, from what I found, I get to know those folks, and I cheerlead to them. I sell them on my idea. And next thing you know, people are implementing it on their own. Not always, but it doesn't hurt to know who are your thought leaders in your group. So that's another part of the SWOT analysis that I was talking about earlier. If you know you have a thought leader, and there's variations of folks that fall into that category, being able to work with them, whether that be your manager, which it should be, or your team leads, which it absolutely should be, but it might not always be. So finding out those folks on your team, and again, that's just building your professional team. That is being able to understand your team at a depth, to say, I know which folks I need to get our ultimate job done. And that's kind of the foundation of laying a groundwork for a lean journey and for a lean implementation and for any kind of real team building. So, and then I'll mention it again, since it's down there, is rowing in the same direction. That is the goal. Rowing in the same direction. And again, when you bring it into a lean framework, it's rowing in the same direction. And that direction is constant process improvement and constant growth. And when you have everybody with that constant mindset of, we're all moving in this together, we're working towards our goals together, everybody's jumping in, whether it's a support system that is a support group that may not actually be your manufacturing group, we have that, getting them on board is extremely important as well. And getting them to adopt the lean system is really important too. I think most of the time we'll see lean begin from the manufacturing core, the manufacturing group, but bringing those folks on and selling them on it and coaching them up into lean is also important. That's one of the reasons they wanted me to come in to this role, is because global supply chain was moving onto the floor and they wanted to mimic the lean system and merge those two together because lean wasn't done in global supply chain externally. So they knew, hey, this guy's coming from the floor. He can help us build that lean team within the global supply chain organization and filter that outward. So that's one of the things we're working on. And we've seen some major improvements there because of that. All right. So these are now, I wanted to link in some lean tools along with some attributes and actions of a good team builder. So hopefully this is clear enough, and hopefully I'll be clear. I'm happy to expand on anything. I was telling Jamie before this, I get going on this stuff, and so just throw up a hand if you have a question. So if you want me to explain a little more or a little less, let me know, and I'm happy to expand, or we can discuss it at the end. So I put down some positive attributes of a lean leader or a team builder in general, and then I connected those in. And so one aspect I think that we all know is a good leader will be a listener. They want to hear those ideas coming from the floor, right? So in your lean toolkit, there should be some sort of a process, which it's very process oriented. There should be some sort of a process to filter those ideas to your lean leaders or to your leaders. And one thing I would caution is this can go very right or it can go very wrong. If you don't have the time to follow up on a lean or on an idea generation system, consider that before implementing the system. One thing that will kill a team is implementing an idea system and you're all gung-ho about it, and then the idea is set on a board for the next 2 or 3 years and never get addressed. That is a morale killer. So how do you implement a system within your lean framework that you know is able to be worked? Sometimes that's building a team around your idea system of folks who are on the floor, who it's their job. You kind of delegate it down to them. They take the responsibility of looking through these lean or these ideas and filtering them up to you, or actually taking action on them themselves. I'm a very big proponent of pushing any type of I won't call it responsibility necessarily, but giving the team the ability to own some of these things so that they feel a leadership point. It's also good for their career progression. When they have leadership elements on their resume, that's a good thing. And that's kind of how I coach them towards that. If you can tell, I've had to do that a few times, but it's a good thing. It gives them the ability to be a part of your system and your idea generation and your growth and your process improvement and all that good stuff. So that's one way to do it. And it's a way for you to almost inactively listen. You don't have to be sitting there having a 2-hour conversation with someone. If they have an idea generation system, you can actually say, hey, this is a fantastic idea. Especially if you know it's somebody who's long-winded like me, who comes up to you and says, I've got this great idea. I really like to talk to you about it for the next 5 hours. And you're like, oh my goodness, I've got so much to do. Well, what it does is it says, hey, this is a great idea. Why don't you put it on the idea system, and we'll vet it out through our process. And of course, defining the process before then is a good thing to have in place. But it's a way to inactively listen to your group and then show them that you're taking action on that. It's just a good team building idea there. The same thing, respecting your people and saying, listen, even if it's an idea that there's no way you're going to be able to implement, that's okay. You just make sure that you're discussing it with them and why it's unable to be implemented, or while it's unable to be implemented in that way. It's not necessarily that it's a roadblock or that it's a completely brick wall, but it might be like, okay, well, let's work together to discuss how we can make your idea work in this factory. Because right now, it would cost $20 million. But if we find some elements of that, maybe we can work together as a team, because we're team building, to determine the best way to implement your idea. So that's another way to use the idea generation system, which is a lean tool, to affect the respect that you have for the team, which is a foundational principle of a good team a good team and a team building. Okay, so professionalism. That's another thing, being in a professional environment, and especially the more we move forward, the workforce, from what I've seen and found, is demanding a professional environment. We used to have different environments of working, and I know that we've all been a part of some that are fantastic and some that are less fantastic, maybe. But a professional work environment and creating some foundational principles and some foundational elements here, that it can lay a framework for your whole team of being an environment that is safe, that is, ideas are definitely wanted, and you're listened to, and you're creating a good framework, a good network of people. And so you're removing the toxicity, the potential toxicity, by creating a professional environment. And some of the tools that you can use there, root cause analysis, standard work, and value stream mapping. And I will hit on standard work a lot because it's one of my favorite tools. This is one that's kind of like a love or hate kind of a tool. And I think it's often because of the implementation of standard work. Sometimes people can use the standard work template or a standard work document to be a micromanagement document. And in some cases, it kind of needs to be, especially if you're performing a process on the floor and you say, well, we really need you per the quality standards to do X, Y, Z, and it's kind of like you have to do it this way every time. And that's why we put it on your standard work. Other times it can be a little bit more open. Uh, and you can make it a flowing document where, let's say one of the things on your standard work is to clean the machine every Friday. And then you realize, that there's a piece of the machine that keeps getting gummed up. And you could easily say, well, this person's just not doing their job. Or you can do a root cause analysis and say, maybe they just didn't know that part of the machine is sticky or has the potential to be sticky. Or maybe that machine needs to be cleaned twice a week. So those are some of the process kind of steps that you can go through as you do your root cause analysis. And what that does is it shows your team, hey, we're a professional group here. This is a professional environment, and we're putting these things into place to be the best. We don't want to be okay. We don't want to be pretty good at building this stuff. We want to be the best. And the best teams have the best processes to getting them to their ultimate goals. And so that's why you can use some of these, especially like I said, the standard work, value stream mapping, finding out where you can get the most bang for your buck. And root cause analysis is another huge one, which we naturally have a tendency to do, but oftentimes we don't go all the way to the root cause. So using a process like 5 whys might get you there too. So that's another that's another one we can talk about. Next down is humility. And this one doesn't often come up in discussions when we're having our leadership and management meetings. I mean, sometimes it does, but humility is an important element for me specifically, I know, because I don't know everything. I don't know what they know about their processes. And I was talking earlier about that, about the idea generation system. I think a lot of the times people think, oh, well, they probably already know that. But I don't. And when I show my team, hey guys, listen, you are the experts. I'm here trying to just make sure that you have a successful environment to work in, that there's an environment built around you. I'm here to support you. I'm here to, do what I can to help you be the thought leaders and the process improvers. And I don't know these things. I don't know how to do your job as well as you do. And just being able to kind of show them your human side and say, hey, sorry, I put this thing into place. It didn't work because, we all will fail at some things. I know that I do a lot. Hopefully fail small and learn, and then put something into place where you won't fail again. I mean, that's kind of the lean process too. But we're going to fail. So being able to come back and say, hey guys, listen, I made the wrong call here. I thank you all for getting us back on track, or whatever that looks like. And it just shows that there's a human side of you as well. And again, everybody wants to be on a team together. Generally, we don't work well as far as team building is concerned when you feel like somebody is outside of the group. And so if you as a manager are putting yourself outside of the group, it makes it harder to then go back in and be like, all right, team, let's get together, do the cheerleading efforts and things like that to get everybody on the same page. So that's something we can do. Is just one of the things we can do is root cause analysis and an idea generation system. Idea generation system tells them, I'm not the expert. You are. Tell me what you know. Please help me to improve these processes. And then root cause analysis, again, it just shows that there's a level of, we need to get to the bottom of these different issues that we're having. And again, I don't know how we're going to get there, but I'll walk with you through that. The next one we'll go down to is kindness. And I put PDCA and root cause analysis. And so how does plan, do, check, act? Which is one of another tool in the system. How does that relate to kindness? Well, this is what I was saying earlier, how sometimes I look at my individual people and the team as a whole as a project that I'm working on, right? I'm a manager. I'm there to support them. They're my project. They're the people that I'm taking care of. So how do I do a root cause analysis on a person, right? And so rather than just saying Sally didn't do her job very well this past week, even though she was fantastic for the past 10 years, well, we just need to put her on a performance plan, right? Because she's just not doing well. Maybe, but did we get to the root cause of why Sally saw, that she was the detractor that way? Did I ask the questions as to getting there, and knowing her and knowing these different things is what you can do, to get to the root cause of what her individual issue might be. And maybe it turns out that it is a machine that has been running through a weird cycle function on her shift, and she just wasn't given any more work to do. So it seems like she's not producing enough. And you wouldn't have known that unless, you start to do that root cause and determine why is her numbers lower, or why, whatever it might be. So doing a root cause on your people to get to the bottom of what their issues are, can be an extremely good tool to use. Like I said, either on a machine or on the people. And then plan, do, check, act is just, it's a way for you to walk with your people through issues or through learning, training, all of these things as you come up with a good plan for them. And I mentioned a progressive discipline, or I mentioned a performance improvement plan. I generally have some form of a performance improvement plan for all of my people. So when you start getting to the heart of these issues, they just kind of start to go away as you develop this process improvement plan for each of your individual people as well. You start to get to the root causes of what is unproductive actions, or what is the waste within their day to day. And you start to filter those things out to make them more productive. And all it does is it increases their morale because they're doing their job better. It increases the amount of idea generation cards that they're coming in because they're seeing things in a new light, all those different process improvements that you can have just through, a simple PDCA, plan, do, check, act for a project for your people. So I won't go too far into that. I'm starting to come up on my time. Sorry, I knew I was going to do this. So the next one we'll go into is accountability, and this is super important. And then I'll kind of mix that with parameters and expectations, because they all kind of fall into the same grouping in my mind. So you have framework of how things should be done. And those are your parameters and your expectations. That's the fence that everybody lives with inside of, and it's safe, right? When you're in that fence and you know what you're supposed to be doing, it's a safe environment for you to be able to do your job. When you don't know what your parameters are, you're like, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? What do they expect me to do? I don't know. And it creates that level of like, oh man, I hope that I am performing the way that my manager or my leader wants me to perform. Well, creating a standard work document, and like I said, this can go into the realm of micromanaging. It can also go into the realm of creating a framework for what my expectations are for my people, so that they can say, I did my job. I did everything on this list. Now, sometimes they say they did everything on the list and maybe they didn't, but that's part of the process. So then you're working on a system. You say, well, if you did everything, then why did problem X happen? So you do your root cause analysis on that problem, and you say, well, you on all of your standard work documents that I go over either daily or weekly or however you want to address those, I've seen that you've got this. So is there a problem with a lower level process? And all of this is just constant process improvement. You're defining those areas that you need to improve. And I've seen standard work uncover problems in a manufacturing system where we had been doing the same thing for 12 years. We put in a standard work document, and we could not understand why our productivity was low. We put in a standard work document, and we saw that at certain elements, certain things, the system would shut down, or there would be this hiccup or that. And everybody kind of said, yeah, we kind of know that that's going on, but we didn't realize until we got the data off of these sheets exactly how much time was being soaked up by these little small problems that happen every shift, every so often. And we started defining that. Then we created a plan. So we got to the root cause of what that was causing that. We defined a plan. Then, the people say, you can go directly back and say, because you filled out your standard worksheets, we were able to determine that this was a problem that we've had for forever and fix it. And so they get some of that, that fulfillment of knowing that they were a part of the solution. So things like that, I think, are incredibly important for just framing out what you should be doing. Then you get to the point, and accountability boards and project boards I have on there as well. That's just visual representations of who's got what, who's working on what, and what I would recommend is you use those to say, who can we help? If you have somebody that's got an accountability board and they're 3 weeks behind the date that they said they would have it, maybe they need some support from you. Maybe it's not one of these things where you say, well, good luck for them. That it's how do we come together and row in the same direction and say, I can help them out in this, so we can all be moving and we all jump on it together. And that's, if you're hearing the all, that's on purpose, because you're building your team. And a good team is going to work together, in a synergistic way, so that you can all, now it doesn't mean that you just take over necessarily and just say, all right, well, they can't do it, I'm going to just take it all onto my plate, which I know that happens sometimes. It's sad. What you do is you say, all right, let's help them out, and then determine a system to put into place so that doesn't happen again. So it's all in the vein of improving that process and improving that relationship, maybe with a support group or whatever that may look like. And then we get to the progressive discipline. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Progressive discipline, I don't love to use that language. If you've noticed, I'm very much a service-oriented leader. I like to serve my people. So that's one of the things that I have to check myself in, because I can lean too far in that direction. So I've learned that about myself. And so putting these particular things in place has been fantastic for me, because it gives me a framework to say, are you meeting your expectations and are you not? So if you're not, then we need to get to the bottom of it. And sometimes it gets to that point where you say, I'm either going to coach them up or I'm going to coach them out. And with the professional environments, there's, again, you have to remember the professional and the union environments. There's certain strategies and certain parameters with a union contract that you have to work through. But at least it indicates to you, if you're not getting your standard work done and you've worked with them, and you've tried to create a framework for their success, and it's just not working out, you have the data. You can stand on top of your mountain of data to say, we have seen this, it's in the data, and we've worked on these specific things. And so you have a framework to say, this is what we've done, this is how we're going to progress, and if you don't meet those progressions, then we may have to sever ties, or whatever that looks like. Maybe move to a new area of something that's more they're more able to do, whatever that looks like. Okay. And every company and every group should have that defined. I think that's a really important part of the definition piece that I was talking about earlier. People should know what the consequences of actions are. So if there's no system defined, then how do you say, well, you didn't really meet my expectations, so I'm just going to fire you? I mean, did you do your root cause analysis and make sure that they were actually the one, that was causing the issue? And did they know, if you do X, Y, and Z, this is the outcome? Here's what a progressive discipline will look like, or what a performance improvement plan will look like. And if you don't start meeting these goals or meeting these expectations, that means it throws the ball in their court, and it shows them in black and white, these are what we expect. And if you don't meet your expectations, this is the end goal. This is what's going to happen. And just being able to define that and define the process behind that is extremely important, because most of the time what I've seen is when you put somebody on a PIP, on a performance improvement plan, and they start going through, or you start doing a root cause with someone, and what you may see is miraculously things get better when the spotlight is shown to the right area. So you can call it what it is, but it actually reduces the amount of those hard conversations that I've had to have, because I think that maybe somebody isn't quite performing to the level that I want, but I want to make sure that I'm giving every opportunity, every option. I want to give it the equal opportunity to be the problem, and not just automatically say this person's the problem, even though that might be sometimes our general disposition, and mine too, to say, I know that there's a background, there's a history, whatever. But the more I have found, I can put it into a system and say, let's systematically go. And maybe you lean towards one outcome, or at least that's where you start first. But you may determine and find that there are underlying issues that need to be fixed as well. And maybe it is, personnel. That's all just depends on the situation. That's very situational element. So I won't go any more into that. I got a couple more slides, and these are lessons learned. I'll try to burn through them a little bit quicker. My goal was to be about 45 minutes, and we're coming up on 40. So this is team building lessons learned. And so these are just 4 kind of, items that I thought about when I was determining, which direction I wanted to take this webinar, and just thought, what might be some general ideas and things that I've learned along the way that helps with team building and with lean, and a lean implementation specifically, or lean growth. At any point in your lean journey that you're on, these are things that you can think of, and it may reframe how you look at it. First is do not associate any form of behavioral correction directly with the lean tool. Essentially, don't use the lean tool as a stick to beat people. And this is kind of a visual that I found. I didn't learn this one the hard way myself, but I saw this happen and I thought, ooh, that did not work out the way we wanted it to. And it was basically holding up the actual lean tool itself was a visual aid and pointing. This is the reason why you're getting in trouble, is basically essentially probably what the person heard or it seemed to hear. And it became about, okay, I've got to beat that tool. I've got to beat that system. And rather than saying, all right, let's use this as a defining of what our actual problems are, the leader or the manager at the time used it to kind of turn the screws. And once it was associated with screw turning and squeezing, the tool was basically not even, well, it was used, but it was moved around. Numbers weren't exactly right on the tool, and items there, on these tracking tools weren't really accurate, so you couldn't use it anymore. So it didn't become a process improvement tool. It became a how do I get around this thing so I don't get in trouble like that guy did. Right. So you can use that data, and I've used data from these tools plenty of times to create performance improvement plans, but I try as much as I can to dissociate the actual tool itself from the actual disciplinary action. That's all I'll say about that one. When implementing lean tools, remember WIFM. What's in it for me? And again, a lot of pitfalls I've seen happen is you get, again, the managerial attitude. Well, we got to do this thing. We got to put in this lean. Okay. You don't like it. That's okay. But how do you try to sell it to your team and think that they're actually going to use it if you don't like it? So that's one element of this. And then the other element is, how do you show how this lean tool can eventually make the job easier? How do you show the folks that this lean tool is going to be worth their while? It might create a strategic pause at the front end because it's hard to get these tools in place sometimes. But in the long run, how is this going to help that person? And hit on that as much as you possibly can, because when people know that it's going to improve their daily life eventually, or can, they're more apt to be involved in it and to see. And again, with the idea generation system that we put into place originally, nothing came out of that for months until I just started saying, I'm going to put your ideas on these boards, whether you like it or not. I had a team whose their main goal at the time was basically to just improve stuff in the cell. They were the technicians within the cell. And so I just started putting their ideas up on the system, on the board, whether they kind of liked it or not to be rude, but they started getting some major recognition, and people were like, that's a great idea. And that's all it really took to spur that on, to start seeing more and more ideas. Now, were we getting thousands of them? No. But were we getting, 6 or 8, 10 pretty good ideas a month? Yeah. And that was great for us in that area, because we ended up using many of those to spread it across the entire manufacturing area and even the facility as a whole, because it was a good idea that somebody that's a practitioner of these things used every single day themselves. And they never thought to tell anybody about it, so this gave them an outlet to do that. So when people know what's in it for them, and if I'm going to, use this tool correctly, I might make life better for myself, more apt to use it. Create strategic downtime for assessment, training, and process improvement. This is hard in a lot of our environments. And I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir out there that we would all like to have more time to shore up our foundations and to do that. And so, again, is the juice worth the squeeze? You have to determine all these things. But the most improvement I've seen, especially concerning team building, is when I've been able to give folks the proper training that they need. And it's actually worked out in the long run to creating more time on our hands. Now we create the strategic pause at the front end to say, I know I'm going to take a dip on this, but long term, I'll be able to slice down the amount of time it takes to do whatever operation it is, because I've taught 3 or 4 people how to do it. And, yes, we're going to be short maybe for a week, but, in a month or 2 from now, we're going to be sitting pretty. Creating backups for positions. I mean, that's unbelievably important. Single threaded operations, as we all know, are super dangerous to the manufacturing process. And so, I've seen that strategic pauses and saying, I'm going to take my best guy, and I hate to do it, but I'm going to take them over here and have them train another person for 2 weeks to get them up to speed, so that if my best guy goes out on, on vacation, then I've got somebody who can continue on that operation. And that's just process improvement. That's growth. So creating some strategic downtime can be a proactive strategy for long-term success. And then finally, don't automatically assume a personnel issue is the cause for low production. Get to the root first, then create the corrective action. I think that that's important. I hit on that a little bit earlier. I won't beat it to death, but making sure that you're actually targeting the right root cause is extremely important. And that's asking the 5 whys plus H or whatever you want to use. If you ask why, you keep asking why until you get to the bottom. And again, it very well could be that your hunch might have been right. But again, I can't tell you how many improvements we've made along the way to say, okay, even though we found out that it was a personnel issue, we still were able to fix the way that we clean the machines, like I was saying earlier, or whatever we do. We found some items that were useful during that process. So I'll move on from that. And again, so I don't know the lean journey that everyone is on. If you might be at the very front end of lean, you might be, way further into lean than I am. But I think I wanted to present this the 5 S's. If you've never started lean, a very good place to start would be the 5S tool. I use the English words. You can go in and find the Japanese words. I can't speak them. I don't know the language, so I don't want to butcher it. So these are sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. So each of these are a step in your 5S, and with the ultimate goal of making these particular items just natural, commonplace. People come into your office when they start their work. They're sitting there talking to their neighbor next door, their buddies or whatever, and they're just cleaning up their workstation. They're putting their tools in the right spot. They got the work instructions here, and they're just talking while they're doing all this stuff. That's the ultimate goal, is to just creating a habit and a method, and that's where you see sustain there at the bottom. And again, this is kind of a foundational step. I won't go too in depth since I'm a little over where I wanted to be. But if you want more information on 5S and how to implement 5S, I know the WVUIE group is eager to help in all ways. I am too. Email me, email these folks, or find out a good place to start if you're on the front end of your lean journey. And then there's some additional tools. I won't go in depth into any of these, but these are things that you can they're kind of self-explanatory, some of them. Standard work, bottleneck analysis, root cause analysis, error proofing, PDCA, which I talked about, just in time, value stream mapping, project boards, accountability boards, and 5Y. And so these are just some things you can use. And this by no means is an exhaustive list. There's a lot of lean tools. And that's one thing that I think you have different schools of thought with lean. You can be wholesale, everything is lean, every tool we want to use. And then you can also say, there's a lot of lean tools that we can implement. We don't want to implement them all, but we want to implement, the lean tools that'll work. And what I've seen in my experience from that is when people start implementing a lean tool here, a lean tool there, they flow into more lean tools that you want to use. So you may start out your lean journey saying, I only want to do 5S. I think that's a good idea, but nothing else will work for me. And then you start doing 5S and you're like, yeah, I think it works out pretty well here. It's helped us out. It's reduced our downtime. And so, maybe we can do like a little project board or something, and it can be organic. Organic is the best way to do lean, is when people start just taking it on, and you may seed the ground a little bit, but when you start seeing your folks take on these lean goals and lean journey themselves and lean tools, that's when you've got more of a lean environment. So it's a really good thing. All right. And so that is the end of me discussing all of the lean stuff that I've gone over. This is my email address. As Jamie said, I'll definitely send these slides out to you if you want them. If you don't, you want to just chuck them out, that's totally fine too. You're not gonna hurt my feelings. But this is my email address. If you have a specific question for me or something that you want me to expand on, I'm happy to write it out and frame it out for you and answer your questions too. So with that, I'll give it over to Jamie, and thank you.
Great stuff, Adam. I tell you what, one of the yardsticks that we measure how the presentation's going is how many people are at the start and how many people are at the finish. So we stayed at 30 the whole time. So you didn't lose anybody. So
right.
So great job. Yeah. While I'm watching your presentation, I think you and Stacy must be reading the same books or having a lot of the same experiences, because I feel like I'm a part of a very well-organized lean team. Anybody who's had to hear me talk in the last for more than 15 minutes has heard me gush about the great team we've got. So got a couple of individual shout outs I'd like to do on our team before we get too into questions, but please, anybody has questions, start putting them in the chat. I see if we've got a few there already, but Tracy Straub, our business marketing specialist, put this webinar together and did a bang up job. So thank you, Tracy. You guys are going to see more of her real soon. Hopefully she'll be taking over my role and running the show here. So great job, Tracy. Thanks for setting all that up. Another person that we need to talk about on our team is Randy Kowalczyk. He's our lean specialist, or a continuous improvement specialist. And we were talking with him a little earlier, and he had a couple of good comments. So Randy, I'm going to let you go ahead and fire those off before we jump into some of these other questions.
All right. Sometimes people hear lean and think, well, we can't use that. We're a job shop, or we have too many products, too much variance, or you hear the classic, we don't make widgets. We can't do that. So what advice do you have for somebody that has that mindset?
Yeah, thank you, Randy. That is a fantastic question. And in fact, at the beginning of my lean journey, I heard that all the time. When you talk about being a widget shop or Northrop Grumman, believe it or not, is a huge company. Like I said, 7,500 people at the Baltimore location where I'm at. We make widgets. I mean, we don't make widgets. We make very specific, very defined tools. Sometimes a lot of our business is one-offs. A lot of our businesses is things that have never been done before. We're engineering them on the floor. And we're running, in the same location, we're running items that are historically and established, and they have all the ability to work well within a lean framework is what, the traditional idea is. Well, I'm not a car manufacturing facility, so I can't just define everything that I do and have every part that's going to fit, and for the most part, and all that. So what I say is, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I've been there before. I've seen that, and I've heard that mentality, and then I've also seen in that same environment where you're still building, you still have processes, and what I would say is, unless you are at the peak performance and there's literally nothing you can improve on, which I don't know anywhere that's like that, unless you're in that situation, you can use lean to improve those processes, because really that's what it's about. It's not, and like I said earlier, there are different schools of thought on this, but you don't have to take lean hook, line, and sinker and just say, today we are not lean and tomorrow everything's got to be lean. It's this massive change and this huge improvement. And honestly, lean is a journey. I said that a lot throughout the presentation, and it is a journey, and you never really stop it. You implement a tool here, and then you work on it and you improve it, and then you see how it works. Maybe it does work. Maybe it doesn't work for you. And you say, well, okay, we tried it. And then you implement another lean tool. And then you say, you know what? Root cause analysis would be a good thing here, even if you're extremely small shop. And you say, if you have a problem that happens in your manufacturing line, generally the best course of action isn't to say, oh, well, it'll work its way out, right? Like, you probably don't want that to happen again, right? If your machine goes down, you probably don't want it to happen again. So putting a small process in place to say, how do we check our machines? How often do we clean them? How often do we do preventative maintenance? How much is our throughput? How many items are we building a day? If you build an item, or how many do you need to build in a year? So just because your individual processes may seem to be one-offs and it doesn't make any sense, overall, your operation, the way that you just work your business, can improve from lean. Like I said, you can even use lean tools on people, like a root cause analysis for why somebody, is having a rough day or a rough week or a rough year. You can use these tools in a lot of different ways. And so it doesn't, I think one of the things, it doesn't have to necessarily be an exact implementation. Framing it up with a particular lean tool, read a book on it, or talk to these folks here who are fantastic at this stuff and get them to give you some ideas, you guys to give them some ideas. Then you kind of make it what works for your shop. You can tailor it to your environment. And that's what I would actually, encourage. Take the lean tools, understand them, and then tailor them to your environment as you see a need for them. Because anytime you say, I have this problem, you can look and just say, okay, I can continue to have this problem, or I can try to find a lean tool that might create a system to help me with that problem, so I don't ever see it again, or at least I know how to manage it. So that's what I would say. I think you can use lean in pretty much any environment. Again, unless you're perfect and you never make any mistakes and everything runs perfectly all the time. If you're that, then, come invite me over. I would love to see an operation that never has any problems. That would be amazing.
Thanks, Adam. And
Right, you have lean tools, and it's a toolbox. If you go and you're doing something around the house, do you always use everything in your toolbox? You don't use it for every single job. So they might not apply, but there's plenty of things that you need and that you can use it and make big improvements.
Absolutely. And you create your framework of how you use lean in your own environment. And then that's when you create your 5 S's and you say, and your standard work, which again, I love. I know I probably gush about it too much, but I really like standard work if you haven't already, figured that out. But, you put that on your standard work and it creates a system of that expectation on what a day should look like. Even if your standard work isn't, completely defined to the nth degree, if you have an idea of what the expectation is, and what I use standard work for a lot, and again, I won't go on too much, but I use standard work a lot to just double check myself. I've got my own standard work document, a leader standard work document, where I like to go back and I like to check, if I've got somebody collecting data for me to determine where a root cause problem is, I don't want to just leave it out there and never go along. That'll kill your lean tool immediately. When somebody will completely stop doing it because they're like, this guy's never going to come back here and look at this. So I like to hit that's on my leader standard work to check this every day or every other day or whatever. And I put that check in the box and then I write some numbers down. And then you can create tracking metrics. You create a metric profile or you create a board there that says, this is where we want to go. We want to build 20 here a week or whatever. And we're at 10 today. How do we put a stepping stones in place to get there? And that tracking those metrics and doing that standard work so that they're or documentation so that you're slowly, eating that elephant one bite at a time. That's how you get to that process improvement, which again, you're eliminating your waste and you're improving your processes, which is what lean is.
Right. With no standard, there's no continuous improvement. If you don't know what's working and what your baseline is, you can't improve.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Very
great.
cool. Thank you.
I'm gonna move on to a couple of other questions here, and we've got one from Nancy Brown. And thanks, Nancy, for spending time with us. I know Bob's Market is probably crazy busy this time of year, but are there some folks that are just not ever going to be team builder material or team participants? And is there a tool to predict applicants' future success in a team environment?
Oh, wow. What a fantastic question. Thank you so much for that one. Yeah, there are going to be people who don't fit into your systems. It's going to happen. Is there a predictor of that? I have thought long and hard about this question personally. I would love to create a predictor of that. But as we all know, we generally work in a system where you have somebody apply for a job and then you get a 30-minute meeting with them. And then you got to pull the trigger. Do I hire this person or do I not? Well, how much do you know about somebody in 30 minutes, and an application? Because people can look fantastical. And believe me, this one has bit me many times before. People can look like they are going to be a certain fit for a certain role. And then they just don't work out for that role. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to work out for any role. So you could potentially say, well, maybe this is just not the right role for them. Do I have anything else internally that could house them? But again, it's like I said earlier, coach them up or coach them out. Either they're going to fit in or they're not. And you'll get a pretty good gauge of how much effort you want to put into that based on how much they improve by your process improvement plan. And if it's just you put it out there and they just refuse to do it, well, that might be a pretty quick trigger. So, and just say, all right, we're not going to do that. But I'm a big fan, and this is just personally, this is kind of outside of the lean realm. I'm a pretty big fan of either internships or some sort of a procedure that people have to go through. I know in our shop, we have there's a 90-day plan where you either shape up in 90 days and we think that you fit our team or we're out. And that's specifically in the union contract. So, perhaps creating some sort of a plan as a test, as a trial could work. But yeah, that's a really hard question. I really don't have the definitive answer on it. I really wish that I did because, you could do a lot of improvement if you have the answer to that. So, but yeah, there's some ideas to try potentially if you have the ability to do some sort of a coaching model where people come in for an unspecified amount, so maybe 90 days, whatever it is, and kind of prove their salt. Yeah, but that's a really good question. I wish I had the answer to that one.
Great, great. And we've got one here from Cindy 9. And actually, Randy and I were visiting Cindy's facility just the day before yesterday. So
Nice.
sorry we missed you, Cindy, but JR gave us a great tour. She wants to know, how do you suggest to incorporate lean in an office environment?
It's very similar. In fact, my environment is much more of an office environment, the team that I have now, because they're not quite on the floor as much. So they're just mimicking what the lean tools are that they're using on the floor and using the same lean language, where we have like what's called an SQDCM board in our area, a safety, quality, delivery, cost, and morale. And so it's different elements of a board that we put up and there's some metrics and things below it. I won't explain too much about it, but what I would do is just say, everybody has a process of something. Even if you're doing, just documenting process updates, there should be kind of an element of what you expect to get done. So creating some sort of a standard work document for saying, we just want you to see this as a check in the box, a weekly check to make sure that you're, that you're performing the actions that we expect you to perform. And, you roll that into the same thing as far as, performance improvement plans you can use. You can do, root cause analysis on any problem you have, getting to the root cause. So doing a root cause analysis is really important. And then just constantly, really the mindset, what I used to talk with my techs about, or the folks on my team, that my tech team is just walking around everywhere you go with a process improvement mentality. Look at it through the eyes of, how could I make this a little better? Some things you might not have any suggestions for, but there's good ideas on your team. I guarantee it, that they just say, well, everybody probably already understands that. So incorporating like an idea board is a good way of doing it. And then just working with each individual person to make sure that they're looking at with a process improvement mentality. And then creating tools or using tools that kind of benefit that. And like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be wholesale. You don't have to throw every tool at it. Like, it was a good example. You don't use every tool in your box for, changing out a light bulb. Find the tools that work for you and start implementing them. 5S is a good place to start. I always say 5S is one of the best places to start. So look at something like that and adapting it to your area, I think would be a good place to start and see what rolls out of it.
Great, great. And I'm happy with sticking around as long as we've got people. Looks like folks aren't dropping off, and we do have a few more questions. One thing that I want to make sure everybody hears before we hop off of here, though, is Randy is available to do a free assessment and talk about how lean might work with your company. So when I send out the information, I'll be sure and include Randy's contact information in that as well. But we're at the WVU Industrial Extension. We're happy to come in and see how lean might work for you. So moving on with some of these questions. Greg wants to know, do you have a favorite form for standard work? Excel sheets or et cetera, anything like that?
I do. I actually created the standard work document that we use for the whole manufacturing facility on the integration operation. So I built it, and I just built a simple a Word document. I split it into 2 columns, and then I have bullet points of the expectations. And this is what I did on the floor for the manufacturing group. And it was like, how many items were you able to move through a particular operation, over an hour? And or you set a goal for that hour and you say, all right, you're supposed, the machine will do 50. We expect 30 per hour. Did you meet it? And you just set up an hour. X met it, didn't meet goal, met the goal, didn't meet goal. And then we look for correlation to find out, are we seeing this at a common time? But really, I just built a document myself. Like I said, I just split it, Word document into 2 columns, and I try to keep it all on one sheet because our folks walk around with clipboards. And so the front sheet, back sheet, fill it out, and you put it in a form or in a folder to be reviewed by the manager. And on my leader standard work, reviewing those once a week was on my leader standard worksheet. But yeah, I mean, I don't have one that's like online, a document or a template or anything like that I particularly use. But an easy Word doc that's split into a couple of columns with bullet points and just some key indicators that you want to collect, or key items that you need each of the folks to do per day or per week, or however you set it up. Having that on there where they can just make an X or make a signature, whatever it looks like. That to me has worked pretty easily. Actually, it works pretty well. I didn't over-engineer it. I'm not an engineer.
Okay, great. And we've got a great comment from Keith Lester at FL Smith, who is someone Randy's working with, which is good. He says, one thing that has proven beneficial to us is to include expectations in the interview/onboarding process. So ISO, safety, lean. And he goes, this creates a platform that opens up conversation early in the process, which in turn helps us make our decision to hire or not hire, which, yeah, that's great.
Oh,
and
yeah. Oh man, what a fantastic way of using lean, even in your interview process. That's awesome. Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah. And FL Smith is one that, you walk in and it's like, wow, these guys really get it. They're really organized,
Awesome.
but they also see that it's a continuous process. So that was why it's been great for Randy to be working with them and doing some good stuff with FL Smith. Good stuff. So that looks like that's it for our questions. I'm sure we could go on forever, right? Because this is great stuff. You did a great job, Adam, and always good information. And thanks for helping us out, Randy. I appreciate your input as well. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here, and we will get this out hopefully early next week. And like I said, we'll include slides and contact information and a video link to the recording. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all.